Success Insight shares the stories of the people with passion and drive who make things happen in the world. Here's your host, Howard Fox.
Hello, everybody. This is Howard Fox from my co-host, Randy Ford. I would like to welcome you to another episode of the Success Insight podcast. Our guest today is Sherry Rentschler. Now, Sherry is an award-winning author, speaker, and writing coach. She is an accomplished fiction writer and poet. Among her works of fiction include Midnight Assassin, The Gypsy Thorn, and Time and Blood. And I'm going to leave you to guess what genre this is. We'll learn about it in a few minutes. Sherry's also an accomplished poet. And this is a little bit about her origin story, which is in the poetry realm. But her poetry includes I Wish You Joy Photography, which is a photographic journey, Paper Bones, and By Light Betrayed, which is a poetry of, I'm going to do an underline because that would give away the answer to my previous question, and the Breaking the Glass Slipper. Sherry, I'm so glad that you're able to join us on the Success Insight podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Howard. It's lovely to be here on a nice, rainy, dreary day. It's a perfect day.
You were just saying rainy, dreary day. It's a perfect day for writing. And I love what you shared there. Why is it perfect for you?
Well, it gives me a chance to sit down and relax and take out my notebook and I just start writing notes. And we were talking about the feeling that you get when you put pen to paper, how marvelous that sound is as you write that pen across the paper, because you can feel the magic oozing out of the ink onto the paper, and that's the fun part. You don't get the same feeling when you're typing on the computer and it's noisy and click-clack, and it's just not the same awesome feeling that you're actually creating something live. So this is a good day to sit down and write. It's a good day to read, too.
That's fantastic. It was bringing up another question for you is regarding what do you prefer to read, turn the pages versus the Kindle Fire? But before I ask that question, thinking about the writing, and it dawns on me, and I'm not sugarcoating anything to my guest, Sherry is an accomplished writer, award-winning writer. And for people like me who wrote one book or a book and a half, as I kind of joke, that's it. I mean, maybe there'll be more, but for right now, that's it. But to sit down and put pencil or pen to paper and to come up with stories, I mean, to be really good at it and consistent, and that's something special. And there's a lot of famous writers before you, whether it's Shakespeare or Thoreau, like the poetry. You've got a lot of good lineage behind you here.
I stand on the shoulders and on the steps of so many people who came before me, but I am by no means famous or probably more infamous for me, but I love writing. It is like breathing. It is what moves me and excites me and gets the passion and the blood going, and that's where it's at. The magic happens when words are spoken, when words are written. And I mean, after all, that's what our history is all about, right? We built our history on words and songs. And without those, we wouldn't know where we came from or what we've done in our life. And even the Indians, they started out with the song. They did everything in rhyme so that the children would remember and carry it forward. So our history is built on words. Without it, we'd be lost. But I think that people who actually sit down and tell stories, whether they're real stories for biographies and autobiographies and the like, or imaginary ones that create creatures and give them life and unimaginable things become real, that's the fun of it. And that's what I like to do. So you mentioned that I have some poetry that's Breaking the Glass Slipper. Breaking the Glass Slipper is my memoir. My poetry is Paper Bones, By Light Betrayed, and the Book of Now. So I have 3 of those.
So I want to hear about a little bit of all 3, but share the story about how you started writing, because I think that's pretty cool as well.
Well, I started when I was about 5.
5.
5. I entered a contest, and it was a poetry contest, and I did this poem called A Fork in the Road. I don't even remember the whole thing. It was like 7 lines, but it was...
I was going to ask you if you remembered it.
Yeah, I remember part of it. I don't know if I go out or in. Let's see. I came to a fork in the road. I didn't know to go right or left. I didn't know whether I wanted to come out or go in. I just didn't want to start over and maybe make a sin. That's something like that. And it got into this young adult or young people's reader or whatever it was that our school put out. And I thought, well, that's kind of fun. So I started reading a lot after that. And I always did read, My mother always read to me when I was little. But after that, I was like, well, they like what I said. So I started writing pretty much all the time. And little kids, it's all drivel. It's the talking ducks and the frogs who have a conversation and that sort of thing. But when I got to be 13, I did what I did for my summer vacation, got printed in the local newspaper, and it was about the birth of my baby sister. And they paid me for it.
Uh-huh.
A whole $5.
A whole $5.
And I was a published writer. And I looked at that money and I looked at that article with my byline on it, and I thought, this is where it's at. This is fabulous. And I didn't get paid for anything again for a very long time, but that didn't stop my writing. After that, I wrote when I was in the military, I had a byline in a newspaper. In the military, I had contests that I entered all the time, and it was something that I was bitten to do, and I had to keep going. And so that's how it started. I even did commission work when I was in the service. People would say, well, would you write me a poem or something for Colonel so-and-so who's retiring? And I'd be like, sure. And so I was doing all kinds of things.
Did anybody ever ask you to write their papers in school?
No.
You wouldn't have done that anyways.
No. I wouldn't have done it anyway, but no. I'm thinking they would have thought, oh, yeah, she'll put, a werewolf in there or something.
It is amazing or astounding. It's enlightening that you discovered your passion so early. I mean, some of us don't get there. I mean, even when we're in our adults, mid-adult, late adult, is we never truly find the passion for whatever reason. But you had a chance encounter with this poem and published it, and then writing the article, and when you're 13. And you've had careers with being in the military, but this idea of writing this being just that is an integral part of your life to where you are today, that's pretty amazing.
I think I've been very blessed in that regard. I know a lot of people say, I have a passion for singing, or I have a passion to paint or something. And I think sometimes fear holds us back from moving forward. It's like we're afraid of rejection, and we're afraid that nobody will like what we do. And so we don't do it, or we don't do enough to share. And it's like people who take photographs, and they have all these beautiful photographs in their house. And you say, wow, you should put some in a gallery. Oh, no, I couldn't do that, they say. And you're like, why not? Oh, nobody will like it. See, they've already convinced themselves that they have no future. When they don't really know, you have to take that deep breath and jump off the cliff and, do a leap of faith. And sometimes you'll succeed, and most of the time you will succeed. But it's not a thing that you can't expect to write the book and have an instant bestseller. Most of us are not phenom enough to do that. Even J.K. Rowling, how many times did she go to a publisher before she became famous?
Exactly. And, I love that, what you just said in this quote a minute ago. Fear holds us back from moving forward. And from a coaching perspective, you've kind of underlined it. They're limiting beliefs. Oh, I can't do that. Oh, nobody will read that. And how do you know unless you step into the arena, as Teddy Roosevelt would have said, is get bloody, get dirty. But unless you've actually stepped in the arena to make that attempt, you're never going to truly know.
And authors are funny creatures. We stand proudly on our stacks of rejection slips because rejection slips prove that we're out there trying and growing and evolving and changing, because with every rejection, we learn something.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's not the things we want to learn, but we learn something. And the more rejections that we get and the more growth that takes place, sooner or later, you're going to hit it. You're going to get there. Ansel Adams, the famous photographer, said that he had to take 1,000 photographs before he got the one that was really good. And I always remember that when I start writing stories. It's like, okay, this one may not be it, but the one I write next time it's going to be it. So you just can't give up.
Yeah, and it dawns on me too. Even you hold up those rejection slips as a badge of honor, but those rejection slips mean somebody is actually taking the time to read your work, or the first chapter or paragraph, to make that decision. But they've read your work.
Well, that's what we hope. That's what we hope. I've sat on a desk where I've had to accept or reject poems for a magazine. I used to be an editor for the American Poetry Journal, which was an online magazine. And I was the assistant poetry editor, and I had to review poems as they were submitted for publication. And sometimes you only get as far as the first line, and you can tell this is a no. And other times you can read a whole poem and go, I'm going to have to think about that one. And so you hope that when you submit something that people are going to take the time to read the whole thing. Truthfully, most editors who see things will know pretty quickly whether it's something they want to read or not.
Right. I think it's interesting in my work coaching. I come across a lot of cover letters and resumes, bios when I'm doing recruiting for some of my clients. And I know some of those resumes are going into what I call a resume tracking system. And it's just looking for these keywords. And in reality, if you don't have so many keywords, it goes into the no pile, and then hopefully an automated rejection letter goes out or email goes out. But it's just not hearing anything, I think, is probably worse than, at least hearing.
Oh, isn't that the truth?
Yeah. I'm curious with the books of poem now. One of those books is the first book. Is there a poem in this collection that really kind of stands out for you?
I have 3. One is, and you deliberately did not mention what one of the books was about. Do you want me to talk about that?
I would love for you to do that. I take my notes. They're on a piece of paper. It's actually on my screen. And sometimes I do a better job than others of actually going through the notes, but I kind of left them a little. I wanted to leave this a little vague because I actually find I would love to be what some of your books are about. Let me just put it that way.
I really
would. Well,
my first book of poetry was called Paper Bones, and it's about everyday, ordinary social issues like divorce and marriage and childhood and grieving and loss and just dealing with life in general, all the ups and downs and things that happen. And it was just a culmination of taking snapshots of moments of my entire life, from Thanksgiving to a poker game that I turned into a contest between me and love, and just all sorts of fun things. There's humor. There's some serious things in there. But then my second book I did was called By Light Betrayed, and it is a book of vampire poetry.
Vampire poetry.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's supposed to be a male vampire speaking about, people think, well, what is there about a vampire? He's a killer, he's terrible. But I decided that no, vampires have feelings too. They see the world differently, but they still feel things. My vampires that I write about, and that is what I write. I write young adult, I don't write young adult fiction, I write regular fiction, but it's all about vampires, and mine don't angst, and mine don't sparkle. No offense to other authors.
There you go.
But my vampires are people who are vampires, but they live a different life, but it's still a regular life. They
have a life.
They go through things like everybody else, but they see it with a different point of view. I do have one vampire who really does like killing, but she doesn't just run out and kill people unnecessarily. But the By Light Betrayed book of poetry was meant to highlight the difference between light and day, that line that we walk in the shadows, that twilight moment of every day, and what's in between the shadow and the light. And so there are poems in there about the feelings and the reaction to life itself and to death. And it has color photographs in there to go along with my poems. There's also a sample in the back of Midnight Assassin, which was the very first piece of fiction I wrote. It's a novella, and it was kind of my way of dipping my toe in the water to introduce a vampire, to see if anybody was interested. And it went over really well, I'm pleased to say.
Very good. Now, how did the genre of vampires in this type of fantasy, how did you settle on it? I'm curious about that, because I always loved vampires, by the way. And it's, truthfully, I mean, the old Count Dracula, the original Black with, I can't remember the guy's name,
Bela Lugosi.
Bela, and even the one before that. Yeah.
Oh, the Nosferatu? I don't remember the German guy's name that did the Nosferatu.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bela Lugosi was my first black and white moment with a vampire, and I fell in love instantly. I was not scared. It just, while all the other little girls were running around wanting to be the blue fairy princess, I was wanting to be a vampire. And it appealed to me. See, like I say, I have the romance thing going with the shadows and the twilight and the living forever and seeing the world in ways that no one else can. That was just always something I loved so much. I grew up on those old black and white movies, Dracula and Frankenstein, and my favorite all-time scary movie when I was a little kid was The Hound of the Baskervilles.
Ah, yes.
Always been a real Sherlock Holmes fan.
Oh, yeah.
But that was my first good scary movie. My father scared me so bad it almost screwed myself right into the ceiling. And I was hooked ever since. But vampires and I have always been a kind of kindred spirits. I don't know.
What is it about, I don't want to come across as a highfalutin academic, but this existential existence of the vampire, what is it about the vampire? I mean, it's the line between light and dark, night and day, but there's the existence of eternity, unless they show up in the wrong place at the wrong time. But they live forever, and so they see a lot, they do a lot. Now, I don't know if they taste or smell, but they're witnesses to history and to man, what we do well, what we don't do so well. And so what is it about the vampire and how they live their life that really kind of appeals to you?
Well, I think that every author who tells vampire stories develops their own canon and foundation for their vampires. But for me, the idea of being able to be truly immortal, where nothing can hurt you except something very, very extreme, and you live your life devouring not only blood, I mean, that's kind of the offshoot of staying alive, but the things that you can learn to do. The languages you can learn, the crafts you can learn. You can become a painter, translator, a philosopher, a historian. The things that you can learn through eons of time and the things you can witness is compelling. But that's not what makes the vampire appeal to the ordinary person. It's the ability that we are beautiful and seductive. And I say we are as a vampire, like I am one. Hello. But it's a seduction.
I'll take that.
I think that the vampirism continues because it seduces us to another side of life, and one that we find interesting, and we're curious, and it's scary, and it's that creepy, giggly, and the dark, scary, where I'm not afraid, and then we can bury our head, kind of thing. And so I think of the vampire is the symbol of the darkness that's bad that we can get away with, and the darkness that's good, that's, wow, I'd like to do that. And it runs the gamut for everybody.
Very interesting. We've got so much to chat about. I would love to just kind of keep going on to chat about the vampire. Can you share a little bit about the series you're writing? And then perhaps there's like a little passage that you could share with us.
I would love to. I have a series called The Evening Bower. It was based on the idea that long ago Atlantis fell into the ocean, and before that happened, there was a race of Phoenix who lived on this island. And when man became corrupt, it began to kill the Phoenix, and Atlantis' destruction soon followed. One Phoenix escaped. And this is my lead character. Her name is Rhea. And she has moved through time, carrying with her the great book of forgetting, which is the history of Atlantis and all of the creatures who used to live there. And also her own legend is in this book. Well, she manages to get away, and she lost her own beloved, her Phoenix lover that they were mated for life. He was killed by man, but his spirit managed to escape. And through time, he's been looking for another host, which he finds in the body of an American Revolutionary War man who had become a vampire. And so the Phoenix Phoenix spirit inhabits the body, takes over, and the vampire and the Phoenix eventually reunite, and that begins the story of the Evening Bower. And it was said when Atlantis was new and young and the Phoenix was there that two Phoenix would mate and they would produce an heir who would change the lives of supernatural creatures everywhere. And so eventually this does happen. Rhea and my character, Morel, have a child thanks to the phoenix blood that they share. And this child then is supposedly the creature who will change the course of supernaturals. And we don't yet know what that change will be as the story has unfolded. And there is a prequel called The Gypsy Thorn, which introduces us to the vampire Drahomira, who is kind of the catalyst that brings all of our characters together. She is great friends with Rhea. And after The Gypsy Thorn becomes the first book in the series, which is Time and Blood. Time and Blood introduces you to the events that bring together Rhea and Morel, plus a few other of their friends. And then that's followed by book 2, Love and Blood. And Love and Blood is what happens when, as we get more depth, and the child is born and other people show up and things start to happen. People try to take the book and try to kill the phoenix, and I can't tell you what happens, but big things happen in Love and Blood as we shake the prophecy. And I'm about to produce and publish the book 3, which is The Gypsy Curse. It comes out the end of this year. It's going to answer a lot of strange questions, so it'll be lots of fun.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I wish I had all the time in the world to sit at a good bookshop or coffee shop. I prefer coffee shops and just read.
Oh, me too.
And with a nice paperback book, no Kindle. Not that there's anything wrong with Amazon, because Jeff Bezos is probably listening to us. But just the idea of getting absorbed into the books and the stories and the characters, I think that was a wonderful aspect growing up for me, and the fantasy novels that I used to write. Now you're doing some other writing in addition to this particular series and genre, and again you have the books of poetry, but you've done some other writing recently, which I thought was very interesting. You're collaborating a bit or to tell a story.
I am so proud to say that I have been a part of an anthology that was just published, and it's called We Know the Truth, Do You? And it's about Area 51. Everybody knows about the big raid that was supposedly going to happen in September, where everybody was going to invade Area 51 and discover the truth that the military has been hiding from this country about were there aliens and was there a spacecraft and everything. So Area 51 raid didn't happen, but 25 authors got together, and I'm proud to be one of them. And thanks to a dear friend of mine, Terry Wilson, she organized this anthology, and all these different stories are in there about Area 51, and it covers a gamut of genres. There's military, there's mystery, there's romance, there's alien tech, there's all sorts of wonderful, there's erotica, and there's crime, and there's all sorts of good stuff in there. And it's 25 authors, and all proceeds from this book, every single dime, is going to charity for U.S. veterans. None of us are collecting any money from this at all. And so the book is called We Know the Truth, Do You? It's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, for Nook. You can get an ebook and print. It's a hefty volume, too. It's over 500 pages.
That's big.
And it's, I mean, you can hurt somebody with this, but you can spend a couple of wonderful days reading all sorts of interesting stories, laughing, gasping. You'll have a great time with this one. We're really proud to say that every dime is going to U.S. veterans.
Fantastic. And we will most definitely provide a backlink on our show notes to We Know the Truth, Do You? And as well as to your author page as well on Amazon. And before we end our time together, a couple things I'm also curious about is you're also coaching and mentoring other aspiring writers. And tell us a little bit about that. What's the experience for you doing that?
I am a moderator for a writing group, a local writing group. We're small, but we have evolved over 6 years. I've been with them. And it started out with just a few kids from high school and a couple of adults who wanted to get together once a month and talk about writing and learn about writing. And we have become a very nice, tight-knit group of about a dozen regular folks who learn about the craft of writing, who learn to do plotting and character development and world building. And most of us every year participate in National Novel Writing Month, which happens every November. For those who don't know, that's where you have to sit down from 1 through 30 November and write 50,000 words. Basically, you're producing the beginning of a good novel. And so we we use all of the year to get together and prepare and practice and work and grow as writers. And then we put it to the test every November. The idea is to do 50,000 words. That's 1,667 words every day. And it teaches you self-discipline and dedication, and it shows you how hard it is to actually sit down and write every day. So either you're dedicated or you're not.
What do you share, coach, mentor, someone who perhaps has the inkling that they would like to write a book? They're not really aware of the discipline that it takes. I mean, you're ex-military, you have discipline. Mm-hmm. And we go into it with this grandiose vision, but then all of a sudden we have to put the time in, the effort, and the focus. If you could give a few pieces of advice for the discipline, what would that be?
I would tell you to write every day, no matter what it is, whether it's a journal that you keep every day or a personal gratitude or ideas or whatever it is. Write every day. Practice every day. Talk about characters. Talk about the worlds you want to live in and write about. And start writing. Tell short stories. There are lots of available things online that you can submit to and enter short story contests. And the only way you're going to learn is to read, study, and write. Every writer is an avid reader, and we don't just read comics. We read craft books. We read biographies. We read military stories. We read anything we can get our hands on, because the more you read, the more you understand how to tell a story. And we all have an innate ability to do that. Some are able to do it easier than others, but the more you read, the more you become familiar with storytelling. And the more you write, the more you learn to tell a good story. That's what I would tell you. Just write every day.
Fantastic. Sherry, in the minute or so we have left, if our listeners would like to learn more about you and your work, what's the best way to kind of get to know you? And again, we're going to share the notes out to Amazon as well, but what's the best way to get in touch and get to know you?
Well, I have my own webpage, which is sherryrentschler.com, or you can follow me on Amazon. I have all my books are available on Amazon. So that's Poet Phoenix. I'm also on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. My author page on Facebook is author Sherry Rentschler. So I'm kind of everywhere, easy to find, and kind of an open book. So I always welcome new people.
Fantastic. And I will share, to our audience, as I was preparing, for our interview, and sometimes it's a LinkedIn page or a website that's just one page and it's barely anything there. And just your awareness of the importance of social media I thought was refreshing, because it's just very accessible across from the website to the social site. So I certainly want to acknowledge that as well. And again, folks, we're going to share all the backlinks. So whatever your preference is on social sites, you'll easily be able to find Sherry. Sherry, in the final moments, before we end the show, we love sometimes to go back and ask our guests for what we call an insight to go, something that was just stood out for you. Maybe it's a quote, maybe it's an idea, a tip. I mean, you've already shared a couple of tips, but it's just something that it's there with you, and it's a great reminder of who you've become as a writer.
Yes, I would, Howard. I have a little tiny poem that I keep on my desk, and it reminds me every day of where I'm going, especially when times are tough and life gets in the way, because, it always does. And the name of the poem is Don't Quit, and it's by John Greenleaf Whittier. And it says, when things go wrong, as they sometimes will, when the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when the funds are low and the debts are high, and you want to smile, but you have to sigh, when all's pressing you down a bit, rest if you must, but don't you quit. Success to failure turned inside out, the silver lint on the clouds of doubt, and you can never tell how close you are. It may be near when it seems far, so stick to the flight when your heart is hit. It's when things go wrong that you mustn't quit.
Fantastic, this quote, because this quote transcends your career, my career, and others who they're not sure, but this is a good reminder and a daily affirmation, if I may. It's just when things aren't going exactly like we had planned or hoped.
And that's how I see it. Yeah, if you don't give up, then you'll always be moving forward.
Fantastic. Thank you again for taking time out of your day. I know you've got a rainy, cold day and internet's down. And so now it's a great day to read. So, but thank you.
And thank you so much for having me, Howard. I appreciate it.
Fantastic. All right, folks, we've just had a nice conversation with Sherry Rentschler. All I can say is go out and check out her work, whether it's the books of poetry, this book's the fiction, vampire genre. I know, really, if I was going to be something other than who I am, I always wanted to be a vampire, and I think I still do. And also, do check out the anthology that Sherry worked on with the other 20-something authors. We Know the Truth, Do You? Story around Area 51, and we're going to share that link as well. And do go out to Sherry Rentschler's website. We'll put those links in the show notes as well. So for my listeners, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, go out there and have a phenomenal day. We'll see you on the next episode of the Success Insight Podcast. Thank you.
Success Insight is a production of Fox Coaching and First Story Strategies. Find us online, successinsightpodcast.com.